Good morning. I'm Lakesha Lingard. You're here with me at the empowerment table. My apologies for the delay this morning, but I was having a few technical difficulties behind the scenes that I had to get sorted out with printing and even with my computer. So I'm going to give you all a couple of minutes as I welcome you. Thank you for joining me again at the empowerment table. I'm so grateful that you're willing to take the time out just to sit with me this morning for tea and tools. I'm drinking hibiscus tea again, become one of my favorites. I'm drinking it cold, which is how I typically like to drink it. But welcome again to the empowerment table. This is the third part of a series that I'm doing on attachment. And so today's topic is titled Healing Attachment Wounds, Moving Towards Secure Connection. And if you missed parts one and two, you can go back on my Facebook page and even on my YouTube channel. I ask you all to even follow me on YouTube. I'm trying to get a certain number of subscribers on my YouTube channel, so I would greatly appreciate it if you all would um, follow me on my YouTube channel. And so today, without delay, I'll go ahead and get into today's topic again, healing attachment wounds, moving towards secure attachment. And so the takeaway for today is to recognize that healing does not require us to forget about what happened. It allows what happened to stop controlling what you expect from every relationship. So that's the takeaway, because again, if you walk with me through the first parts of this series, we learned about attachment, and we learned how attachment does or can impact our relationships. Our attachment is really what we learn to believe and think about relationships. So if you if you recognize what insecure attachment style that you possibly have, because again, this is not a place for diagnoses. This platform is not even meant to replace mental health, individual mental health services, but just to provide helpful information. But with that being said, again, whatever you believe your attachment style is, then you can be rest assured and have confidence and knowing that it doesn't have to control you. It doesn't have to control what you expect out of relationships. You can learn and begin to see relationships as a place where there is security and where there is trust. So that's the hope for today. um, There's research that suggests that people who experience insecurity or inadequate care early in life can develop more secure relationships patterns into adulthood. And then it's through a process that's called earned secure attachment. So you begin to have those instances or those experiences of what secure attachment looks like. And again, it begins to show you that you can expect something different from a relationship. The first section I want us to talk about, I'm going to try to keep up with my PowerPoint presentation. And I would love to see who's in the comments. If you are in a place where you can comment, I would love to see your comments. So our session objectives. We're going to name what attachment wound is and what is not. We're going to be able to recognize the relationship rules that we've carried into adulthood, understand how healing happens through new experiences, through repair and through practice. And then we'll also leave here with the repair practice for responding differently. So that's the objectives for today's conversation. And so from understanding to healing. So again, welcome you. I welcome you all back. And power in part one, we explored the relationship blueprint that we developed. And part two, we learned why our nervous system may react strongly when something activates an old expectation, right? And so today we're moving into another question. Once I recognize this pattern, how do I begin to change? So that's the question for today. Some people understand their childhood very well, but they continue repeating painful relationship patterns. They may be able to say, I know why I feel rejected. I know where my trust issues came from. I recognize that I shut people out. I understand why I keep choosing emotionally unavailable partners. And that insight, it is very important, but we have to move beyond insight, right? So that's what we're tackling today. So today, the hope is to go from insight to healing because those two things are not identical, and we have to be able to move in that progressive way. And again, that's when we can begin to see like true change take place when we move from insight to healing. And that is the hope for today, or even just the beginning. And if there's anyone out there who is in individual therapy, and if you feel like attachment is something that you struggle with, I would challenge you to take notes this morning and even share this information with your therapist. And so in your individual counseling sessions, that's where you can go deeper into just how we are discussing things here on a much more surface level again, but then you can take this with you into an individual counseling session. You can understand the origin of patterns and still need practice, support, and new relational experiences before the patterns change. And that is very important to understand. A chat engagement. When you hear the word healing, what is the first word that comes to mind for you? Do you think about freedom, time, pain, peace, forgiveness, growth, safety, work? Because we can all feel or think of something different when we hear that word healing. So I'm interested in what you would put in the chat, and I'm hoping that I can. My goal is to be able to keep up with the chat in real time. But if you're able to put something in the comment, feel free to do so. So again, when you hear the word healing, what is the first word that comes to mind? Acknowledge, because when you acknowledge what comes to mind for you, you are encouraging someone else to share. Our definition of healing is often shaped by what we have been told healing should look like. But today, I'm going to clarify what attachment healing is and what attachment healing is not. What is an attachment wound? I'll start there. So that's the chat prompt. I'll leave that up for a minute. What is an attachment wound? Clinical term, attachment wound. So attachment wound is a relational experience that disrupts a person's sense of emotional safety, trust, connection, or worth. So that's the attachment wound. Good morning, Yolanda. I see you in the comments. Thank you so much for joining. And so, again, that's what the attachment wound is. I'll read that again. It's a relational experience, right? So, think about relationships. It disrupts a person's sense of emotional safety, trust, connection, or worth. It may come from repeated experiences. So as we go have these repeated experiences, um, emotion such as emotional unavailability, chronic criticism, inconsistent affection. And so those are some of the things that could lead to this disruption and in this relational disruption. Yolanda says that peace comes to mind when she hear the word healing. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. That is definitely true. Because when we are healing, we can have a sense of peace. And what I've come to learn about peace is not about the circumstances or the situation being totally resolved or totally gone. It's just a new way when we've accepted that healing. It's a new way in which we move, into which we conduct ourselves in the process of healing, because we know healing is a process. So thank you for sharing that. And so again, this attachment wound, this relational experience that disrupts safety, connection, trust, and worth, it happens when there is repeated experiences of emotional unavailability, chronic criticism, um, inconsistent affection, parentification. Think about that. If you were in childhood and you often had to take on a parental role at a very young age for whatever reason, if your parents worked a lot, or if there was some abuse or some substance issues, or whatever the case is, parentification can be that disruption in that relational experience. Repeated broken promises, rejection during vulnerable moments. So you were vulnerable with someone and you experienced rejection repeatedly, being punished or mocked for expressing emotions. So, those are just a few examples of what can cause this disruption. It can arise from a significant event in adulthood, like betrayal, abandonment during a crisis, or the discovery that a trusted person maintained a serious deception. So someone you trust, there's some deception that was found there. That's another thing that can cause this relational disruption. I want to give another example. A child frequently comes home excited to share what happened at school. The caregiver is physically present, but repeatedly responds without even looking up. They may respond things like, not right now, you talk too much, go find something to do. That isn't a big deal. So, as an adult, that same person may stop sharing good news until they are certain someone will be interested. They may say, I'm just private. And privacy may genuinely be a part of their personality, but withholding positive experiences can also be a learned strategy for avoiding disappointment and feeling unimportant. So then you want to be able to look over your life, your experiences, and see if you can relate to that. You may not be able to, but again, this is just helpful information. And I want to make an important clinical clarification: attachment wound versus trauma. Not every attachment wound will often or will automatically meet the criteria for a trauma related disease. A painful experience can matter deeply without even being labeled as trauma. So, again, that's important too, because we learn a lot of buzzwords online, and so sometimes it can be easy for a person to mislabel something. So not every painful experience has to be labeled as a trauma. Because trauma related diagnoses, they involve like specific symptoms that happen over duration of time, that happen with a certain amount of intensity, and has a certain amount of like impairment in life. And so keep that in mind. The internal working model, the relationship rule we carry, that's our internal working model. And being aware of that. It's a mental and emotional framework through which we interpret ourselves, other people, and relationships. So there can be expectations that people stay people stay when life becomes difficult, or my needs are inconvenient, depending on someone else gives them power over me. So we can have all of those kinds of thoughts. That's our internal working model. And so there are researchers who describe these internal representation as involving beliefs about ourselves, about other people, and whether support will be available. So I think this is crucial to this next step of where we're going. Let's see. An example, a woman is invited to a weekend gathering. She wants to attend, but she has had an exhausting week. So instead of saying, "Thank you for inviting me, but I need to rest," she goes on anyway, brings food, helps clean, and stay later than anyone else. People may describe her as dependable, strong, generous, always willing to help. And those qualities, they are truly genuine qualities. But underneath that, it may be an internal rule that says people value me most when I'm useful. So that's just a relatable way, a way to just kind of understand what that internal working model is. This is why healing is not simply about just telling a person stop people pleasing, right? It's helping them to recognize that deeper internal working model that could be or that is at play. And I want to even talk about a social media myth versus like a clinical reality. Social media says just know your worth, right? We hear that a lot over social media, but in reality, knowing your worth intellectually, that doesn't change the internal working model that has been built through those repeated experiences with people. So a new belief must often be you got to understand it, you got to practice it, you got to experience it emotionally. It needs to be repeated over time and then reinforced in a safe relationship. So look for safe relationships. That I think that's going to be the important thing when you begin to have those safe relationships. It helps you to challenge the thought, that internal working model that may be telling you that your needs are unimportant or they are inconveniencing other people. And even like an internal model that says love has to be earned. So someone with that internal working model, then what will their behavior look like because of that belief, that underlying belief? There are memories, implicit memories when the past is felt, but it's not remembered. I think that's very important. We don't, sometimes in certain situations, we won't always remember the past verbatim, but it's just we feel it, but we don't remember. Sometimes it's not as easy to remember where this feeling came from. Learning that influences feelings, expectations, and behavior without a clear story attached to it. That's what implicit memory. I learned this thing. I remember this. I feel this thing, but I can't even put a specific moment to when I learned it, but you know it's there. The example you see there, a person can suddenly feel small or feel ashamed, suspicious, responsible, or ready to leave before they even know why. So it's that implicit memory going on. I mentioned this before in a previous session that the body keeps the score. And so that's a book titled by Bessel van der Kolk. He was talking about trauma, but I'm just reminding you that sometimes our body remembers what we can't remember cognitively. And so the this feels familiar is an invitation for you to explore. And not just explore one specific cause. You may want to just go a little deeper to say, why does this feel familiar to me? I can't put my finger on the time or the place when this response came or when I began feeling this way, but I know it's something. And this feels familiar. That's a sign of you becoming curious, because remember, I oftentimes talk about whatever we're doing, take a curious stance to a curious approach, not one of condemnation, not one of judging. We don't have to judge it as good or bad, right or wrong right now in that moment. Is it just is. And the best thing that you can do for yourself in that moment is just to begin to explore, do that exploration. Let's see. So we explore. Let me give another example. A spouse can begin to reorganize their kitchen with visible frustration. No insults are spoken, no threat was made, and the other spouse will immediately start apologizing, explaining, and offering to correct things that were never mentioned. Why is that? Maybe in an earlier home, loud cabinet doors and forceful cleaning may have been a signal that the adult was angry, right? And that was punishment, or and it could have meant that punishment or conflict was coming. So then you're in this current situation, when a person sees that, they're connecting it back to that earlier experience. The current reaction may feel disproportionate to the present moment because the body, remember, the body is recognizing that familiar pattern before the person consciously identify it. But an important clarification, our implicit memory is not proof that every unexplained feeling comes from a hidden trauma. A reaction may be influenced by current stress, sleep deprivation, hormonal or medical things, relationship dynamics, anxiety. There could be a lot of other things to account for this. And so, again, healing requires curiosity and not automatically coming to a conclusion. When we automatically try to come to a conclusion, again, that is the human brain trying to find safety, trying to find predictability. The brain, which we've talked about several times, that doesn't like the uncertainty. So the brain will can automatically want to jump to a conclusion, which prevents you from just taking a curious stance to find out. Um, Repetition. Why familiar can feel safer than healthy. That's important, because we can oftentimes go to a behavior, a situation, a relationship because it feels safer. Because that can sometimes feel safer than the unknown of trying to do different, trying to let go of this unhealthy relationship, this unhealthy friendship. At least I know this person will yell. Then after they yell, they'll slam the door and then they'll leave and then they'll come back home with a gift or with an apology. I'm used to that. That sounds familiar. So I'd rather go through that than go through the unfamiliar spaces of leaving and developing new relationships or new friendships where I don't know what I'm going to get. So that's it. That explains why what's familiar can feel safer than even sometimes what's healthy. When we're trying to move in a healthy way, we're breaking those patterns. And so that feels very scary, right? Because then we have to worry about the disappointments when things don't go well. But you have to give yourself grace, give your friends grace, give your partner grace. You all may be in a place where you are learning new experiences or new patterns of behavior. So it won't go 100% as planned. But I think if we can kind of expect that, kind of like expect that there's going to be some discomfort with this healthier way of being in a relationship, that can give us the courage that we need to keep going in that way. Relationships are important. And so we have to be able to develop those new patterns over time. Reenactment and repetition compulsion. People sometimes create familiar relational patterns, not because they consciously want to suffer, but because familiar patterns are predictable. I said that early. Predictability can feel safer to the nervous system than the uncertainty, even when those familiar patterns are unhealthy. I said that a minute ago. I'm going to give an example. If someone grew up trying to gain attention from a distracted or emotionally unavailable caregiver, as an adult, they repeatedly become deeply invested in people who are difficult to reach, inconsistent, already committed somewhere else, emotionally guarded, interested only when the distance increased. Not because we want that pain, but because that pattern was so familiar to us. So people oftentimes see it like, why am I attracted to the same person? Or why do I only attract this certain kind of person? And to be honest, you're probably attracting different types of people, but you're leaning into the person that kind of offers that familiar pattern. And so when you break the need for familiarity and break that need for just wanting to feeling safe or being used to a certain type of response from a person, you'll be able to see that there were other options available all along, whether it's in a romantic relationship or even in a friendship. So again, I hear people oftentimes tell themselves that I only attract a certain amount, a certain type of person, a certain man, a certain woman, a certain friendship. That's probably not true again. You are creating different types of people, but you're leaning into what's familiar to you. So that's the part that has to change, where you're choosing to lean into. And when I explain it to them that way, they begin to kind of see that, yeah, because I did meet this person as a friend and that friendship felt uncomfortable. So sometimes again, we can we can have a false sense of what's actually going on. When a stable person communicates clearly and follow through, that type of relationship can feel too quiet, unexciting, suspicious, like there is no chemistry, right? Because that's not the chemistry we were used to. And I've even heard people say, she's boring or he's boring. And so, again, because they were probably used to the chaos that came and other relationships, that this healthy way, this stable way of communication can feel boring, and the person can think we don't have nothing in common. There's no chemistry there because we have attached our chemistry to unavailability, somebody being guarded, a person being inconsistent, someone who's emotionally connected somewhere else. even physically connected somewhere else. And so that's very important for us to realize. The individual may not be attracted to the mistreatment themselves, right? Because again, nobody wants to be mistreated, but we can be accustomed to associating uncertainty, pursuit of a person, and emotional intensity with a connection. That's where the change has to come. Let me give you some clarification, clinical clarification on chemistry. Strong chemistry is not automatically evidence of compatibility, safety, or destiny. Sometimes our chemistry can reflect a genuine attraction, shared values, mutual enjoyment, but other times the intensity may reflect that unfamiliar emotional uncertainty, anxiety, idealization, intermittent reinforcement, right? A wish to finally receive from this person what was unavailable earlier. I see that happen a lot where we feel like we're finally going to receive it. And the goal is not to distrust every strong feeling, but it's just to evaluate these strong feelings alongside character, consistency, availability, mutuality. You've got to be able to evaluate the feeling alongside these other very important traits or values that you want to see in the relationship. And so just keep that in mind. A chat engagement. Which relationship quality is most important for healing? Type one that you see there, or type your own. Type one word. Is it consistency, honesty, patience, accountability, emotional safety? So it's good that I love to have people just kind of make open acknowledgement, because if you say consistency and you type consistency, then you've got to be committed to evaluating this relationship where there is so much intensity there, but is consistency there? There's this intense emotion, but there's no honesty there, or patience, or accountability. So then that's when you want to just kind of question yourself. Again, curiosity. Curiosity. Why am I attracted to this? Is this a part of a larger pattern in my life that needs to be broken, that I need to work towards? Um, I want to talk a few minutes. We're almost at the end before I get to our strategy for today. I want to just discuss this section here. Earn secure attachment. Earn secure attachment. Earn secure attachment describes the development of secure adult relationships functioning despite our earlier insecure, unstable, neglectful, very full of adversity. We're able to develop secure adult relationships. And so that is what we know as earned secure attachment. It doesn't mean that your childhood no longer matters. It means that childhood is no longer the only source for which we learn how relationships work. We're learning that through these new experiences, that there is more to relationships than what we previously thought when we were just basing it on some of the inconsistent, uncomfortable, unhealthy patterns that we may have saw and early in life. Earned security may look like a person who still notices. All right, so this is important. It can look like someone who you may still notice an urge that you have to chase reassurance, to withdraw, to over explain, to perform for approval, to assume the worst, to hide a need, but they increasingly make healthier choices, different choices. So again, You may notice that urge. If you're a person who would often chase reassurance, it doesn't mean that urge won't still come. And the more you practice, that urge will decrease as time goes on, but immediately you'll still feel those urges again to chase that reassurance, to withdraw, to over explain, to perform for approval, to assume the worst, to hide a need. But you can also ask different questions. Tolerate reasonable delays. So if there's a reasonable delay in, a person getting back to you, you'll learn to tolerate that. I was just speaking to I was in a couple session late yesterday evening, and I was speaking to this couple. And so the wife in the relationship, she recognized that her attachment style was anxious attachment, and her husband identified as being anxious avoidant. And so they talked about times where she was seeking reassurance from him, and then what that felt like for her when she didn't get the reassurance that she was hoping for. She felt rejected, she felt unimportant, she felt overlooked. And so we talked about ways where the work can happen from both ends, right? He has to be able to recognize that because he identifies as anxious avoidant, that sometimes he can pull back. And she recognizes that as anxiously attached, she leans in so strongly. So she is working on now learning how to pull back, learning how to tolerate reasonable delays, and him not being able to respond to her immediately. He works a job with child protection. He's on call. He is going seeking after the security of our vulnerable children. So sometimes he cannot respond. So intellectually, cognitively, she knows that. But when those emotions are triggered, she admittedly said that she sometimes has trouble giving him time to respond back. And they gave other examples too. But now she's working on feeling that urge to chase his reassurance while also tolerating reasonable delay. And then we even talked about things that she can do in the meantime to help her with those urges, right? Because and you see how only when you're curious are you able to recognize that and then choose something different. Other things that you can also do, you can express your disappointment without punishing, receive support without immediately repaying it. That's good. If we're someone who feels like our value is tied to what we do for people, and we're the dependable one, we're the consistent one. Sometimes you just got to learn to receive support and just sit in that, right? That discomfort could make you want to, let me go ahead and repay, let me go ahead and do this because you did that for me. Just sit in the support. Again, this earned secure attachment. Be able to sit in the support that another person is offering you. Let's see. Remain present during manageable conflict. So when the conflict is manageable, how do we remain present? Our attachment style can tell us to just disassociate, disconnect, but then remaining present. Leave relationships that repeatedly violate their safety. That's a big one, right? Because that goes back to what I said earlier. We can sometimes choose an unhealthy pattern simply because it's familiar. And and being able to leave that relationship because it's violating safety. I'm not talking about just being comfortable. I'm not talking about preferences, right? I oftentimes talk about preferences over principle. If it's just a preference and it is not something that violates safety, physical safety, such as like repeated abuse, if it's not that, then that's something that you can learn to sit in. But if you're able to leave a relationship that repeatedly violates safety, you've broken that pattern right there. That's one step in breaking the unhealthy patterns. An example I'll give: a woman is accustomed to agreeing with authority figures, even when something is incorrect. At a medical appointment, she realizes the treatment instructions do not match what she was previously told. Her old pattern is to remain quiet because questioning a professional feels disrespectful. But an earned, secure response might be, I want to make sure I understand. This recommendation sounds different from the earlier plan. Could you explain to me what changed? So she's not being aggressive. She's remaining connected to another person without disconnecting from herself. And so the key point here is security is not being passive. It's not passiveness. Security involves a relationship with your own voice. That's good. That's good. You have to have a voice in your friendships and your relationships. It can be a telling sign if you're in a relationship where you don't have a voice. And of course, this here is showing us that there are ways to appropriately make our voice known, right? Being able to be heard. And again, not in an aggressive way, not in a passive aggressive way, but just in an assertive, positive way. I came on a little bit late. I don't want to keep you all too long. I want to go ahead and get to the um, tool for today. So I may finish up this information at the beginning of the next session, if time permits. But I want to go ahead, for the sake of time, I want to get to my repair tool, REPAIR. So let me get to that. Oh, that was some good information. Yeah, I'll have to come back to that. Okay, let's get to the repair tool. Use this when an old attachment expectation is activated. So, first, the R is for recognizing that old expectation. You can ask yourself, what am I expecting to happen? They will leave, I'll be embarrassed, my needs will be rejected, conflict will become safe. So you got to ask yourself that. You got to recognize it. What am I expecting to happen? And then the E, examine the present evidence. And so you're going to examine the present evidence by asking yourself, what is actually happening right now? So that allows you to separate the current facts from the past experience just by asking that question. P, practice a secure response, right? So choose a small action. Ask something directly, state a need, set a limit, wait before reacting. Sometimes that might be it. Accept the appropriate support. So that is how you're putting it into practice by practicing that a secure response. A, allow discomfort. That's going to be a tough one. Because again, a lot of times the discomfort is often what we are trying to get away from. That's what we're trying to escape the discomfort. I can raise my hand and say, yes, there are times when I just want to escape the discomfort, but we have to allow for the discomfort. A healthier response may initially feel uncomfortable, it may feel awkward, it may feel unsafe, but it doesn't automatically mean that it's wrong. So we have to be willing to accept that discomfort. I identify the outcome, and you can take a screenshot of that. What happened when I responded differently? Did the person leave? Did they become defensive? Did they respect the boundary, or there may have been something else? So this provides useful information about the relationship and your patterns. And sometimes a person may be like, oh, okay, yeah, I understand if you can't. That makes sense. And so the story that we told ourselves in our head, we get a chance to see a different outcome. So this provides, again, useful information about both the relationship, right, and your pattern. And then R, repeat, repeat. So repeating is what's going to build the security. One choice may feel insignificant, but you have to know those repeated secure choices, they help build a different relational expectation. I have friends now that I can repeatedly, because of repeated experiences that I have with them, I know that they will hear me. I know that I can count on them. I know that I can just let off some steam, and they will not only hear me, but they will give me their insight. And so that builds like different expectations relationally, so I can begin to see something different. And so that's important. So I hope that you are willing and ready to try this repair practice technique. I've tried this. I've been doing this technique such as this for many years, and definitely see the positive results of doing those steps, taking those steps. And I'll say for me, allowing discomfort, that was where I really had to put in the work, because again, like I said earlier, we can easily recognize why I do this, why I say that, but when it's time to sit in the discomfort of no longer doing that thing, no longer saying that thing, no longer repeating that behavior, that's a different part of the work. That's a real intense part of the process. And so choose to allow yourself to be uncomfortable. And again, I just want to make sure I'm clear. Discomfort, we're not speaking of abuse, right? Because we also earlier talked about moving away from relationships that repeatedly violate safety. But now we're just talking about the discomfort that can come with some of our attachment behaviors. And so a closing reflection. I want you all to think about this. You don't have to put it in the chat. The relationship rule that I am ready to question is I must always be strong. People will leave if I disappoint them. My needs are too much. Conflict means love is ending. I have to earn care. No one can be trusted, right? These are just some examples. I would say for me, I can remember, because I grew up in a big family, and I oftentimes tried not to make waves because I saw all of the hard work my parents were doing to take care of us. I have to I've had to challenge the question of my needs being too much. That was a big one for me. And now after like noticing that, right, I recognized that so many years ago and then began to challenge that my needs are not too much. If I need clarification, I'm going to ask for clarification. Whatever it is I need, in an appropriate way, I'm going to ask for it. And that wasn't always the case early in life for me, in my early 20s, definitely as a teenager, feeling like sometimes what my needs were too much. And so I challenge that. I question that. My needs are not too much, and neither are yours. And so that rule may have helped you navigate an earlier environment, and you can appreciate what it developed, right? So I appreciated what it developed without allowing it to direct every relationship I have today. It developed in me a sense of independence. It developed in me a sense to self regulate and to self manage. And I appreciate that. But I don't have to let that rule excessively direct every relationship. I still want to be independent and self managing and self regulating and all of those things, but not no longer to the expense of not asserting my needs, right? And so that's what I learned from that. My closing message: healing an attachment wound does not mean becoming a person who never needs reassurance, right? Who will never, feel afraid, who will never misread a situation. It just simply means developing the ability to notice that old expectation while remaining connected to the present, and then choosing a response that reflects who you are becoming. You're not betraying your past by doing that, by learning something new. You're giving your present relationship an opportunity to be different. And that is amazing. I want to close with a few affirmations. I invite you, if you want to repeat one of these or repeat all of them, write one down if there's one that really, really resonates with you. Let's see. Closing affirmation: my past shaped my expectations, but it does not control every outcome. I can remain connected without abandoning myself. Mistakes can be acknowledged and repaired. I'm capable of building security. Wow, those are good. I can receive support and maintain healthy boundaries. Healing can be gradual and still be real. That's amazing. Yeah, that's amazing. So I invite you to repeat one of those affirmations. I can remain connected without abandoning myself. I think that's one that is really resonating with me today. Yes, yes. I'm grateful for that. Wow. So thank you all for joining me. Again, I came on a little late. I have a lot of information. I may go on YouTube and just do a few shorts of the information that I wasn't able to share here. And so when you get an opportunity, subscribe to my YouTube channel, and you'll be able to see those shorts that I'm going to create probably in a little while now. But part four, because I don't want to blur part three into part four. Part four: building secure relationships that last. And so that's going to be the final session where we're going to learn what secure connections look like in our everyday adult relationships, how to communicate our needs without demanding or even disappearing, right? How different the difference between boundaries, this is a good one, request, expectations, and controlling. Because sometimes when we're dealing with attachment, the meaning between those things can be blurred and unclear. How to recognize emotional availability, how secure people approach trust, conflict, intimacy, and dependence, and practical habits that helps relationships remain safe, remain mutual, and remain resilient. And so this week again, this week we focus on how healing. I'm sorry, this week's focus on healing what shaped us, but in our final conversation, we're going to focus on how to use that healing to repair relationships when the connection and the individuality of that relationship can thrive. So join me on my YouTube channel where I will be sharing a couple of points that didn't have time to make on here, but I do thank you all for joining me. I thank you, Yolanda, for sitting with me this morning, and I thank even those who are going to see this on the repeat. And join me on YouTube. And I thank you all, and I'll see you all next week, next Tuesday at 11 a.m. Thank you so much.